Oh my gosh, what's wrong with my controller, boy? I pressed square. He did not shoot. One second. There we go. There we go. Hey, big shot. Oh, he ain't gonna shoot the. Ooh, on your head. Ooh, that's a good move. That's a good move. Ooh, good shot. Big green beans. On your head. We brick. We duck on your head, boy. You said you don't want the fade. You said you don't want the fade. You said you don't want the fade. He shooting us. He big brick. What's up, man? It's your boy, Young Camel Toe, man. We live on YouTube, man. We just hit 1,000 subscribers, man. We did it. New album's out. It's called Young Camel Toe the God. Young Camel Toe the God album is now on Spotify and iTunes, man. It just dropped today, man. No cap. It got 9 songs on it. We've already had 10,000 plays on the album in the first day. Shouts out everybody on the stream, bro. I know. Y'all was like, hey, y'all lit that album up, bro. That's what I'm talking about. Ooh, he dunking on your head, boy. On your head. Ooh, big dunks. Hey, what's up, y'all live on the chat, man. Say what's up to the niggas. Oh, he had the rush. He got the rush slips. What's up, Q Money, man? Thanks for the subscription, bro. I know. We got a lot of subscribers, man. GG's, man. What's up, BMX Rider? How you doing, man? Yeah, man. Today we made $2,000 in the stock market, man. Shouts out to the Forex, the SP500. Damn, you made 1,000 a day through the stock market? That's what's up, bro. Hey, for all the stock market traders out there, man, keep doing your shit. Get it lit. Hey, Kunda, such a good person. Hey, Kunda.
I don't think it's that they're cynics. It's that they are pious. They have taken on a way of thinking that means that you sequester a part of your brain for thoughts and responses that are not based on logic. And we can't say that that's crazy because most of the world's human beings are religious.
Yeah, no, I totally follow you there. That is, I mean, I tend to think of it as a cult, but the difference between a cult and a religion is just numbers of subscribers. So it's as it grows, it certainly could have the shape of a new religion. Let's talk about how to move forward. I mean, just what would a sane path through the wilderness look like, and how we should think about identity and just what the goal is. I mean, in my mind, the goal is something like a colorblind society. I mean, so that to truly overcome racism would not be to arrive in some future where more and more of us are passionate anti-racists. It would be to arrive in a future where we could never dream, really, that skin color could have moral or political significance, right? I mean, just as is the case with hair color today. I mean, no one is trying to figure out how many blondes or brunettes or redheads are in various positions in society, and for good reason. Nobody cares. And if we perversely started caring about that, right, and started advertising our grievances with respect to hair color, would have taken a significant step away from basic human sanity. And so we have to recover sanity somehow with this variable of race. I mean, just to give a little context here, I mean, anyone who's been listening to my podcast for a while knows that, and who knows anything about my views about the nature of the mind and the nature of the self, knows that I don't think a person should even, at the end of the day, identify with the face that he or she sees in the mirror each day. Like, that is not the proper locus of one's self-concept. But, how much less should one identify with a group of people, most of whom will be strangers forever, who just happen to superficially resemble the face you see in the mirror each day? I mean, it just seems completely nuts to think of oneself in those terms in any kind of ongoing way. And the idea that I would spend any part of today thinking about my whiteness or feeling solidarity with other white people because we share some skin tone, in the midst of my life, that would be synonymous with me suffering some kind of brain damage. It would be a kind of illness of the mind. And yet what is being advertised to us from all quarters is that group identity, and again, this, within the wokeness, this extends beyond race. Covers sexuality and gender and other variables, but there's a primacy of group identity that is, apparently there's no vision any longer of getting beyond, right? It's just, but as much as I want to get beyond it, that's not to say that I believe I'm colorblind now, right? Because that is actually, it strikes me as impossible as long as one is aware of statistics. So for instance, what I just said about being able to predict who is committing, all of these crimes in Chicago, right? The fact that I know these background facts about just the identities of people, who are committing robberies and other violent crimes gives me a certain expectation. I'm very surprised to hear it when it turns out to be a Hasidic Jew, and I'm not at all surprised when I hear it's yet another black man who's guilty of whatever the crime is. And so it's just that sort of background expectation which violates any principle of color blindness now. And I guess the flip side of it, for me, recently I remember I was watching one of these SpaceX launches, and when they went to the kind of the press conference side of things, one of the people on the panel was a black woman who was one of the rocket scientists. She was an engineer of some kind. So, the reality of that situation for me is, I'm watching that, and it made me inordinately happy to see a black woman rocket scientist. And so, and the only way to understand that, psychological change in me is two things are going on. One is I have some, though I never thought about it up until that moment, I had some background, statistical belief that it was fairly uncommon for a black person, much less a black woman, to be a rocket scientist. But in addition to that, there's a deeply positive, albeit not at all colorblind emotion, which is I'm overjoyed to see a black woman rocket scientist. Like that, I want there to be more black women in those roles. And, conversely, I want there to be fewer black men in the role of yet another booked suspect for a robbery or a homicide in a major American city. So just the mere awareness of the statistics kind of overrides any aspiration for being truly colorblind at moments like these. But that failure of colorblindness cannot be the same thing as racism, right? Because what I want is all of these good outcomes, and more good outcomes and fewer bad outcomes for black people in either case.
Ooh, that's a bad pass. My bad. What's happening, man? You live on my YouTube. Tell them how you feel. Tell the chat how you feel, man. It's your boy Young Camel Toe, man. What up, Q Money? What up, Foliation CZR70? What's up, 747B class? OE123. Yeah, man, we live on YouTube, man. That's how we doing it. Yeah. We just hit 1,000 subscribers, man. Hallelujah. Let's get it. Let's get it. It's gotta. It's that hot young camel toe. Who knows about him? Oh my gosh, young camel toe. Yo, man, it's the boy Young Camel Toe, man. We live on YouTube, man. How y'all doing? Yep, subscribe, man. Young Camel Toe, the greatest. Okay, yep. Hit me up, dog. Hey, thanks for the subscription, man. I appreciate you. I appreciate you, dog. Uh-oh, uh-oh. Slow dribble. You said what? Okay. So wait, why are you shooting? He going up. He said I only got on your head, boy. Ooh, greens. Oh, I tried to throw an alley. We not playing this game serious, bro. This is not a serious game at all. Oh, hey, how you throw alleys? What the hell? He didn't throw an alley. I know, that's what I'm pressing. Alright, I'm gonna do it again. Hold on. I got you. Double. Oh. No way. I got the block? That's crazy. I ain't even do nothing. I looked at my phone, that shit blocked. They got automatic animations if you got Intimidator. Automatic. What up, TYB Parker? Thanks for joining the YouTube stream, man. Thank you for the subscription. What's up, 747B class? What's good? John McWhorter, thanks for the subscription.
So the question is, how do we get there? So, but it does strike me that there's this transitional period where color blindness isn't quite the prescription. And I guess the question of affirmative action lands right in here. It's like, what is the right policy to be implementing, given that I think the goal really is to get beyond any kind of politics of identity.
Yeah, that's what we were supposed to want, and that's become unfashionable. And there are reasons for it. It's interesting. If you could go into a graduate seminar in a humanities department on just about any subject, and you could, hook up wires to every student after they had, signed a certain protocol, making sure that everything's okay, knowing that nothing unpleasant was going to happen to them. Put some wires on everybody, EKG or something like that, and then just get up in front of the class and say identity. And you could watch people's blood pressure go up a little bit, and you could probably measure, if you did a quick blood test, endorphins going through their veins. There's this notion that what it really has to be about is identity. And what I mean by that is that these days we're taught that the enlightened black person centers their sense of self on their relationship to what white people are doing or not doing. And so what exactly is your identity? And your identity has to be caught up in this idea of not being white and also being in eternal complaint about what white people are doing or not doing. That is considered the advanced thing. That is higher reasoning. That is the equivalent in this religion to having faith in Jesus. And so, if that's what you're doing, then the idea that we're going to get past race is inconvenient, because for that kind of person, and unfortunately that kind of person is common, for that kind of person, if you're not thinking of yourself as colored, so to speak, you don't have anywhere to grab onto. To even think of the idea of a colorblind America is to imagine an America in which you cannot imagine just where you would fit in. What we're dealing with is ultimately what happens to Homo sapiens when groups get larger than about 150 people, where nobody has to wonder what they are. With white elect, in this case, a lot of it is that you want to have a sense of purpose. And if it can't be that you're just somebody's brother and somebody's son, and you marry somebody and all of you go out and you hunt whales or something like that, you don't have any existential crisis. Once you're in a large modern society, you want to have a sense of what you are good for. What's your purpose? It can be hard to find that. It is not natural to wish to be an individual, and yet that is what modernity forces upon us. So one thing that you can be is this crusader where you're battling racism. But that means, especially with the way it's being put these days, that you must think of yourself as this evil white person who's always going to be racist no matter how many good things you do for black people, and you feel good about being able to say that about yourself. If you couldn't say it, then who exactly are you? And it's wrong to suppose that any of these people on either side, the white side or the black side, and of course that's a vast oversimplification, but it's not that anybody's trying to make money, it's not that anybody's trying to have power. If anything, it's part of the self-definition of the elect to think of themselves as not having power. It's what makes you feel like a person. And so, what we have is a situation where here is the black female rocket scientist, and I'm sure that the typical elect person applauds that in a kind of perfunctory way, but what they want is for it to be made easier for black people to become rocket scientists by getting rid of all of the really tough math. And I'm not exaggerating. You can actually hear people saying these sorts of things, as I have walking next to them. You can read people saying things like this. There are tenured and hot-shot black professors who stand up in front of august bodies of people saying that it's racist to expect black scholars to be mathematically competent. And I'm not exaggerating. And so the idea is that if we're going to have a colorblind society, it's going to have to be one where how we do rocket science is changed, or that you can become a rocket scientist without learning a lot of the things that until now it's been thought of as absolutely necessary and even defining for a rocket scientist to know. And that's really dangerous stuff. Again, partly because it's horrifically condescending. If the idea were that you could be a rocket scientist by not doing the things that rocket scientists are supposed to do, everybody would know the ones that had not done the things that you're supposed to do, and everybody would be reinforced in thinking there was something wrong with black people, which the elect wouldn't mind. It's not that they're going for it, but they wouldn't mind, because that would give them further fuel for talking about how indelibly racist society is. But yes, ultimately we want to get past these distinctions, and yet my friend Thomas Chatterton Williams, whenever he tries to talk about how we need to start moving back towards the colorblindness that we see people in black and white newsreels singing of, well, he gets roasted as some kind of Uncle Tom, or he's a white supremacist. And of course, Sam, we have to talk about the fact that for a lot of people, the instant answer here is the cops. So for many people, the idea is that, for example, my identity must be focused on how I am not white because of what happened to George Floyd. Now, the problem there is that with OJ, I had a whole kind of Bildungsroman about that. I was disgusted watching those black students on TV cheering when it was painfully obvious what O.J. Simpson had done. It took me a while to fully get that, yes, everybody knew what he did. It was painfully obvious, and I couldn't stand listening to people pretend not to know at the time because I like to have all the ducks in a row. But it was seen as a vigilante justice against a genuine terrorism that the LA cops had exerted against particularly black people in Los Angeles, and there was a similar feeling across the United States for reasons which statistically made sense then. And even if they didn't make sense exactly in 1997, people's sense of how the world works for them is not going to change instantly because of gradual sea changes over time. So nowadays, I see that the O.J. Simpson performance art had a certain understandability. It disappointed me a lot. In my first book about race, Losing the Race, I'm still white hot about people's willful refusal to understand the real facts on that case. Now I kind of get it, but goodness, it's been a while. OJ was that 1994? So here we are 26 years later. There are people who weren't born then who have 2 or 3 kids and real jobs. It was a very long time ago. And at this point, we're in one of the most challenging situations that I have ever known in terms of how we move forward, which is that if you look at the statistics, it is quite clear that the idea that cops, even subconsciously, kill black people out of racist animus or even subtle racist bias is simply insupportable. It doesn't work. And I was somebody who thought that that was true until about 4 years ago, and I was in a conversation with my sparring partner, Brown University economist and black man Glenn Lowry, where he and I were arguing about this, and I said, Glenn, you'd have to prove to me that this sort of thing happens to white people. And not only does it happen to white people, but there are further arguments that make it clear that even if black men are killed disproportionately to their numbers, then unfortunate facts about who commits the most crimes, including homicides, not to mention just factoring poverty and how that affects interactions with cops, whether you're white, Latino, or black, makes it clear that the simple idea that's so intuitive, that George Floyd died because of the color of his skin, simply doesn't go through. And yet, Sam, what does worry me is that we are at a point where, because of the religion and its imperatives, you can't get that across to a critical mass of people. I have watched people much smarter than me presented with the very simple facts who simply can't hear them, and these are people who are usually rather even-tempered people who get upset. This really presses a button. And so, unfortunately, a lot of the people who identify as X, Y, or Z and seem to be going directly against what Martin Luther King was calling for would say that they're doing it because the cops killed George Floyd because he was black, and that kind of thing keeps happening. And as long as that's what they know, and as long as they won't listen to what the truth is about black men and the cops, which is that the cops are a serious problem in this country, but that when it comes to who they kill, the data simply doesn't support that black men are being killed because cops are racist against them, we can't really get anywhere. That's the hardest thing about this, the cops.
Interesting. Yeah. So, as most people listening will recall, I did a podcast in the immediate aftermath of
What's up, man? It's your boy yungcameltoe, man. We live on YouTube, man. Like and subscribe for your boy. Like and subscribe for your boy. Big boy stomping in my Air Force Ones. I need to purge. Give me to purge.
Solo podcast. As I said at the time, I consciously resisted the impulse to bring on someone like yourself to sort of to midwife that conversation, because I just felt like the idea that I couldn't say what I thought needed to be said on my own as a white guy was pernicious and worth not capitulating to. So I did it solo and got a lot of support and also a lot of criticism. People can't shake the feeling that a white person shouldn't be saying these things, very much along the lines of what you just said. I know you read the transcript of that podcast. I'm wondering, is there anything you think I got wrong, or is there any place, is there any daylight between us on this issue?
You know, Sam, the honest truth is what you said on that podcast was all spun gold as far as I'm concerned. In terms of bravery, I was struck by your mentioning something that even I have hesitated to ever say anything about because of the nature of the situation, which is that really, you know, if the cops, you know, grab you and they want you to,
You should just go along with what they You can't shoot. Don't even guard him, boy. Oh my gosh, cuz. What the fuck? Hey, congratulations, I King Slayer. Congratulations, boy. You went done. I King Slayer's a real one, dog. If you ever trying to run, my boy, hit me up. I need more real niggas on my squad. I need more real niggas on my squad, nigga. I need more real niggas on my squad. It's very rare I meet a real nigga in 2K, man. But anytime I do, man, I got some respect, man. That boy, I King Slayer, boy. That boy was hitting phase from deep. Ooh, I went 4 for 5. Yungcameltoe, you know they on her poppin'. Ooh. Mac, I'm goner. Ooh, I King Slayer, that nigga went crazy. Oh. Nigga fell down. That nigga is trash, bro. How the fuck this nigga M1? I mean, if that nigga gone, bro, I'ma still run these niggas with. Yeah, that's a no. Yeah, we just not gonna do that, cuz it's just not gonna happen.
Do something. You need to let them do it. The idea that you're being some kind of hero to resist, that you're supposed to think about the cosmic sociopolitics and kind of flip the bird at the cops or do worse, and that ends up creating a lot of these problems. Frankly, as people say, there is some of that, and I do think that ideally we would say one way that some of these things wouldn't happen is don't resist the police. You know, basically just do what they say, and as you said, put in your objections later after the heat of the moment has passed. If you feel that you've been stopped unfairly, if you feel that something has gone wrong, you can lodge the complaint. These days, there are more channels for getting your complaint out than there used to be. Social media means that you can basically have your say and possibly have it picked up much more easily than you could have in, say, 1974. But not then. None of the walking away, none of the yelling and screaming, none of the spitting, etc. And I feel like, I'm black and I can't say that because I feel like a lot of people feel that these people are having their say in a society that is dedicatedly set against the well-being of black people and black men in particular. And I just feel like many people simply couldn't hear that. There's a part of them that feels like this resistance of arrest in cases like this is a kind of new form of civil rights. And I sense that I could cut through that even less likely than I could make people understand that a George Floyd who was white, such as Tony Timpa 4 years before him, very similar situation, could have been killed under the same indefensible conditions. So it's a tough one. But no, what you said, I stand behind you. You were correct. And I thought to myself, it's kind of sad that you're not allowed to make this kind of logical sense when talking about these issues, because so much of it has been encrusted in what's thought of as higher reasoning, but is really a kind of performance art that serves more to make people feel secure in themselves within the structure of elect religion than to prevent bad things from happening to people. And so, for example, George Floyd. Take away the war on drugs, and the cops would have much less reason to patrol disadvantaged black communities. And many negative interactions, that's not what happened to be happening with George Floyd, but many negative interactions wouldn't happen simply by virtue of that. There's an educational crisis with kids that disproportionately affects disadvantaged black kids, which has to do with how reading is taught. And to be very quick about it, reading should be taught by teaching kids how to sound out words. You'd think that was the most natural thing in the world. But there are other reading philosophies where you teach kids to recognize words as whole pieces because English spelling is weird. And you let them do that instead of, frankly, learning how to read. You and I probably learned by reading chunks, and that's because we are middle-class, readaholic kinds of people. But for kids who come from not book-lined homes, from kids who come from places where most communication is oral rather than on the page, you need to be taught the good old-fashioned way. It's surprising how that does not happen for a great many black kids who really need it. And once you're just an okay reader, you're never going to be all that great in school, and you can't make the most of, say, a moderate, although not great school, because you weren't taught how to read right. I had seen this happen. And finally, there needs to be free, easy access to long-term acting contraceptives that are reversible, but for 5 years make it so that you can do family planning without having to work too hard. Way too many births of children are accidental. And if a lower income mom does not want to have kids until she's gotten on her feet, a way to avoid the kinds of accidents that happen to almost anybody in the course of life is to have these contraceptives be available to as many women as possible, and this would of course cover black as well as Latino and white women. Women of that demographic in all colors have been shown in studies to like these. No talk about eugenics is appropriate here. It's just about being able to plan your family without thinking too hard and without so many births being accidents, especially if you're somebody who would prefer not to interrupt the growth of a child once it's started. Yes, I'm talking about abortion. If you don't want to have an abortion, great, but the LARCs, as they're called, make it so that you don't end up having to deal with those choices. If you did those three things, just those three, it would solve so many problems for black people who need help. And all three of those things would go a good 80% of the way towards solving the problems we're talking about, regardless of how Derek Chauvin, or however you pronounce his name, feels about black people in his heart of hearts. However privileged white people are or aren't, it would really put black America back on its feet. But we're not supposed to think about anything so proactive, because those aren't religious thoughts. We're supposed to think about things that are more emotional, things that are more interpersonal, things that make you feel like you've got the Lord in you. And that's where you get books like White Fragility. That's where you get books like How to Be an Anti-Racist. And oh my goodness gracious, that's where you get How to Raise an Anti-Racist Baby. Which means that my children, 5 and 8, are going to have teachers. This is what scares me to my socks. My kids are going to run into this, and I'm trying to think of what I'm going to do about it. They're going to be these teachers with shining eyes, not cynics, shining eyes, teaching my biracial daughters that they need to primarily think of themselves as black girls who are going to suffer racism at the hands of their white classmates. And I say no, 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 no. But I'm afraid that we're getting to the point where there's no school that I could put them in where I could keep them from that, and I don't have time to homeschool. That's what's worrying me. But we need a real race sociopolitics that's about getting out on the ground and doing real things. And instead, we are engaging in a kind of charismatic navel-gazing, and I think that we really need to get past it.
I'm in precisely that same position with respect to the education of my daughters, and it's amazing to witness. I think you just have to, at the appropriate moment, have the conversation with them to inoculate them against the brainwashing that's coming, or that has already started. But it's a fascinating thing to try to navigate. I want to linger on this issue of the police videos, because they have such an outsized effect on everything that's happening here. I mean, there's comparatively very few of them that have been widely seen. We really are talking about something like a dozen or 24 videos that have defined this moment culturally. Now, no doubt there are thousands upon thousands of them available. I've watched, many more than dozens. The thing that I just want to reiterate about these videos is that they are very hard to understand, much less understand dispassionately, right? I mean, these are functioning, as you say, they have a religious significance. I mean, these are, held up as icons in, Orthodox Christianity. I mean, this is the moral core of the religion, the injustice that is patently obvious here with
Good
the frame
analogy.
of this phone. And yet they're functioning, to my eye, much more like a kind of pornography of grievance and distrust of institutions. And again, they're just reliably misunderstood by even very well-intentioned people who are not implicated at all in the video. It's just, my mother can't understand these videos. She reflexively sees everything that Ibram Kendi would want her to see in naively coming to one of these videos. So the thing to point out is that for every video you've seen, whether it's the George Floyd video or Eric Garner or any of these other ones, one, there are differences among them that are incredibly important, right? Just for anyone who understands violence and what cops can do and should do to protect themselves and the public once things start running off the rails. All of these videos are highly non-analogous with one another, and yet that is virtually never acknowledged. And the cases where we don't have video but where we know something about what happened, like the Michael Brown case, just totally unlike these other cases. The dissimilarities need to be noticed. But then there are, for every video you want to fasten on as emblematic of the problem of racism and police violence, you just have to know that there are other videos where all the relevant variables are reversed, where the skin color of all participants, cops and victims, are reversed, right? You just swap that all out, and you can find that video. And one thing that largely goes unacknowledged is there are videos where the thing that the cops are most worried about, suddenly getting shot in the face by the person who, until a moment before, showed no sign of being armed, those videos are there to be seen too, right? So they're the thing that explains how spun up the cops often are in these circumstances where they're shouting commands and going increasingly berserk in the presence of a non-compliant person. One, it so often speaks to their lack of training. They simply don't have all the tools they need to non-violently control somebody. We're speaking now on the day after a video that's especially disturbing has circulated, which makes many of these points for me. And there's a video out of Tulsa, I believe, of a white person being pulled over where two cops are attempting to make an arrest. And it's not clear from at least the version I saw, which now has several million views. I saw it on Twitter. It's not clear how this all started. I'm sure this person was driving like a maniac, or you don't know why the cops are so spun up. But once they're engaging him in the car, they are getting ready to tase him, and they do, and it doesn't work. And again, tasers often don't work. Then they begin pepper spraying him. The guy just refuses to get arrested. He does not want to come out of the car. They're trying to pull him out of the car. They don't have the skills to physically do this well, where they can keep themselves safe and actually immobilize him. So they're yanking on him every which way and shooting him with pepper spray. And the guy's complaining about the injustice of this all, and he's innocent, and this is a violation of his rights, and why are you doing this? And had he been black, up until the final frames of this video, this would be yet another case of monstrous misbehavior on the part of cops.
I would have heard of it by now, right? Exactly.
Yeah, and in the sovereign citizen lunatic cult in white society, I'm sure it also is emblematic of the overreach of state violence. But what happens at the end of this video is that this guy is wearing a t-shirt and shorts. I don't think it's even clear where he pulls the gun from. I think it probably was in his waistband. He might have retrieved it from his car as he was being pulled out. But up until the last moment where you think, okay, well, I'm not sure why they're tasing him and spraying him with pepper spray, but the cops are really freaked out, and this guy, they're just not successfully arresting this guy. He's got his cell phone in one hand, and the next thing you know, both cops are shot. I think one has died. I'm not sure about the state of the other. And every cop knows on an hourly basis that this is a possibility every single time they have an encounter with a member of the public. It is absolutely obvious from the cop's eye view of the world that it is very hard to tell who the bad guys are. And we live in a society awash with guns. And so you owe it to yourself, if you're someone who has been successfully propagandized by the Black Lives Matter take on all the famous videos. You need to see a few videos like this one from Tulsa to know what cops are dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
This is a traffic stop, and you get to watch two cops, at least one cop be executed because of it, and that's the complete conversation about this. And so yeah, I mean, the punchline is, whatever you're being arrested for, it doesn't matter that you're innocent. You have to follow directions so as to minimize the possibility that the cop is going to feel that something you're doing with your hands is presenting such an intolerable risk to his safety or her safety that they have to draw their gun and point it at your head, and now you're risking being killed for no good reason.
Yeah. So often it's about somebody who reaches, and it's clear that the cops are really, really afraid of somebody reaching for a gun and killing them. And I would have to assume that they're not afraid of that for no reason. And yet there seems to be a notion out there that that's something that the cops are only afraid of when it's a black person. And it leads me to something that I've come to realize over the years about these cop cases. And I should say, and I think it's very important for me to say this, I was not thinking this way until about 4 years ago. I had the BLM thought about this. Many people who don't like me don't know that in my books I have written about this. I have a whole essay about the police and profiling. I knew this was the one thing that justified the way people like this think, as opposed to, frankly, everything else about being black. But the thing about this...
The mistakes that I did means that it been no use. To lose What's happening, man? It's your boy yungcameltoe. We live on YouTube. Live on the YouTube. What is this? Church news. Making listeners. Making this. What's up, Maxie boy? Thanks for joining the stream, dog. Subscribing for your boy yungcameltoe. That's what I'm talking about. You don't want this?
Politics and pop culture, sports and history.
Okay, Spotify. These niggas is hitting me with all that, like. They hit me with all the ads, dude.
It's that whenever you see a video, such as, the ones that we've seen now from Minneapolis, Kenosha, there seems to be a new one about every week these days, is first of all, you have to ask, is there a real...
If you'd like to continue listening to this podcast, you'll need to subscribe at samharris.org. You'll get access to all full-length episodes of the Making Sense podcast.
Go on forging progressivism of the kind that we thought could bear fruit and what that means. And this is the final chapter, and it's going to actually be the toughest one because I want it to be constructive rather than destructive, is that we've got to learn how to stand up to these people and say no. And it can't only be the occasional weird person like you or me who doesn't mind an argument and for some reason doesn't mind when people yell at them. Everybody's going to have to learn that you stand up to this sort of person. You tell them that you are not going to agree with them, and that includes that you do not think of yourself as, for example, a racist. And then this is something that is going to be a major adjustment. And goodness, we've had to make a lot of adjustments this year. But I think it's important that people learn how to make an adjustment, which is that they're going to get called a white supremacist, for example. You're going to get called a dirty name by a person who's usually educated and or very articulate. And they're going to call it to you loudly. They're going to say it again, and they're going to spread it on Twitter. We have to realize that that can happen without the sky falling in. And I'm gathering examples of people who actually have the nerve to stand up to it, who keep their jobs, who watch progressivism continuing to happen. Because if we don't do this, we're going to see our institutions taken over by this perversion of what progressivism is, by people who genuinely think of themselves as doing good. But we can't be scared of being called a racist to such an extent that we let all of this utterly misguided, under-thought-out, manipulative nonsense shape what we thought of as intellection, the arts, and moral philosophy.
Yeah, well, so I should remind people of your background as a linguist because it's relevant here because this trend we are opposing in so many cases seems to have language on its side, right? And I can only imagine that you as a linguist must be amazed at some of the clever, if not albeit cynical moves made with language here and the kinds of people taken in by them. So there's a few examples I have in my head here. One recently on Twitter, you may have noticed that Joyce Carol Oates, the quite famous, accomplished, well-regarded fiction writer, lacking any irony or self-awareness, wrote on Twitter the other day that Antifa means anti-fascist, right? So there could be nothing wrong with this group simply because of how they had branded themselves. And I think there you and Steve Pinker should probably show up at her house for an intervention. I mean, that's just amazing to see. But even more widespread is the effectiveness of the branding of Black Lives Matter, right? As though it has this exact same pretense of being morally unassailable. And everyone seems to be taken in by it. I mean, to say any word of criticism about Black Lives Matter as an organization or as a movement or with respect to its tactics or extreme positions held by some of its loosely affiliated members, to utter anything other than mere assent to the branding is to be on the back foot trying to argue that you're not racist. And it's very clever and really insidious. So I mean, just what has been your linguistic ride through this morass in the last few months?
Well, I wish that I could talk about dynamic and frightening synergy between the use of language and the ideology here in question. But to tell you the truth, I think that a lot of it really is just a matter of what people's ideas are. Now, to an extent, people are seduced into thinking these are valid notions because of, large, often Latinate words. Intersectionality is a pretty cool word. If you don't want to say tear things down, or if you want to feel like you're doing something constructive,
Hello?
What's up, Jim?
What's up? What you up to? I said, hey, how's it going?
It's going fine.
Alright, cool. What you up to?
Watching the Lakers against the Nuggets.
The Lakers are winning?
Fourth quarter. Lakers winning by 3 points.
Okay. You think the Lakers are gonna do it this year?
I don't want them to do it. I want the Nuggets to go to the finals and play Miami.
Oh.
But I don't want to go.
Nah, I gotta go with the Lakers. You know, I mean, I'm in LA, so I might as well.
Well, what is going to be the Lakers against the Clippers?
Say that again?
Well, if the Clippers are beating the Nuggets and the Lakers are against the Clippers, who you go for?
Oh, Clippers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I mean, for me it goes Warriors, Clippers, and then Lakers. You know, that's the third.
California, what about the Kings?
What do you mean? What about the teams?
Well, California, fourth choice.
Oh, Sacramento doesn't count. That's not a real team.
Oh, okay.
That's not a real team. When was the last time they made it to the playoffs?
Yeah.
Nah, that doesn't count. I forgot Sacramento even existed.
Yeah. So what's you up to?
I'm playing NBA 2K21 right now. It just came out.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it just came out like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
How's work, man?
Yeah, work is good. Yeah, work is going good.
Okay.
Going good.
Cool. Karis is back at the house now, right?
Yeah.
How's that been?
It's good. Yeah, she came back, with the fires and everything that's going on up there. And 6 months pension, I think. She's quite spiritual.
Uh-huh.
She's looking for something.
Right.
Something else. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all good.
All right.
All good.
I've been watching Jimmy Butler's highlights. I don't know what happened to Jimmy Butler. That's not the Jimmy Butler I remember.
Well, he's the leader of that team. I mean, they got a lot of guys. They had this rookie last night.
But I'm
37 Hero, I think is his name.
right. But he just looks determined. It's like he doesn't cut his. He just looks like he almost looks like Django.
That is kind of true.
He look. I'm like, is that Django on the court?
He said he wasn't going to invite nobody from his family coming to the bubble. No friends, He said he was there for some reason at the time.
He's just doing the title. I like that. It's a new focus. Yeah. But I mean, it's gonna be the Heat and the Lakers, and I mean, if he can do it, well, that's great. But I don't really see LeBron going down to the Heat like that.
Well, what's interesting though, LeBron, I think about his stats. In the first half, he was really good.
Yeah.
Because long as he doesn't play as well. He doesn't shoot as well. Like, it's not as effective in the second half.
That's true. But I mean, he has AD. Rondo's been doing a good job. So I mean, it's not just LeBron. LeBron can have a bad day. I mean, he pretty much has a super team right now.
Well, the key to the whole thing is not LeBron anymore. It's actually after the
Yeah, it definitely is.
the only deal.
Yeah.
Rondo's had some good games, and then he's had some other kind of games where he wasn't that good.
That's true, but normally Rondo in the finals, he normally comes through. I know Bobby's happy.
Bobby's a Laker fan.
I know. That's why I said I know Bobby's happy. He's gonna finally get him another ring.
Yeah, we'll see. Hey, I was on Murray. Yeah, I mean, that was bad.
Anything new going on, Benicia?
No. No, it's nothing going on. It's pretty low key up here, man. Well, the new thing is we got fresh air again now.
Right. I was about to say the air quality just went up.
The fires in this pocket right now, so that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. How are your kids coming along?
Oh, they're coming along well. I just was in a Justin Bieber music video. Got a nice little check for that. Did 2 other acting jobs, just like small little print jobs. And I've really just been I've been playing basketball every day. I found that they've been taking down all the rims of all the courts in LA, but I recently found a new court that they didn't get to the rims yet, and it's like and on a daily basis it's like 60 people down there.
Who's taking the rims down?
The city.
Why?
They don't want people playing.
I don't understand. Well, because of the pandemic?
Yeah, because of the pandemic, they literally took all the rims down. They just forgot a couple of them. So now people are all just going to those, certain parks, and like all the parks that they didn't take them out, it's all hidden. It's like deep in the neighborhood. You got to take a left, right, left to get there. It's almost like a gated community type of hoop.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's almost like Rucker Park now because there's not too many activities that people could do, so everybody's just going to it's families out there now. There's whole families, mom, dad, people even putting money on the games and stuff. It's kind of fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's cool.
Mhm.
Hey, where's Ernest at now? What's he doing?
He lives in downtown LA.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He's also he's doing day trading as well.
Okay, he's doing day trading now too?
Yeah.
Yes, day trading has been okay recently?
A little slow this week, but it's been cool.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow, that's good. That's cool.
Is mom there?
Birthday is tomorrow.
Yeah, it's Keenan's birthday.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. Yep. Is mom in the room?
Is mom home?
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to holler at her?
Yeah.
Yeah, hold on.
All right.
I'll see you.
All right.
Hold on. I ain't want to say hi to you. You know.
Hello.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. Good. I'm gonna have to listen to that. I don't have Spotify. I don't need it. I just needed to put it on my phone anyway.
You don't have Spotify?
No. Long time ago, I think I did.
What do you have on your phone? I feel like you got a whole bunch of apps that nobody uses.
Yeah.
Like Spotify, YouTube, SoundCloud, Gmail, Facebook. Those are like kind of the key apps,
Right.
Spotify is free music, right? Any song you want to listen to is right there.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How was your day?
Oh, it's full. Very good. But I'm trying to go to the CDC and get back and teach May 22nd, but they home.
Oh.
And unemployment because the HR department didn't send me my notice until mid-July, although it was dated May 5th. But we didn't, none of my staff got the notice until mid-July.
Oh.
And then when I first applied, like July 18th, I didn't know it didn't go through. Then like 2 weeks later, I called them and they said to reapply. So then I reapplied. And then they say that it's not starting work too.
I see.
Yeah.
How's work?
Well, right now we're just doing a lot of staff meetings, and I'm teaching people how to do Zoom and things like that.
You're teaching people how to do Zoom?
Yeah, and my staff, some of the people on my staff, but one of the...
Wait, how do people have jobs who don't know how to do Zoom? How's that even?
Because most people weren't familiar with it until last April. Well, you and myself.
Yeah, but I mean, like Zoom, but Zoom is like self-explanatory. It's self-explanatory. You literally just download it, and there you go. I said Zoom is self-explanatory.
Yes, it is.
All right.
I think there's something wrong with her iPad or with her Zoom account because she tried to invite me to a Zoom 4 times.
Oh.
Could you empty those things outside here? Outside? Thank you. Particularly when you have a big thing like you did, the apple juice, and you know it's cool, just take it all out. Thank you. Anthony Davis has a bad ankle now.
The new NBA 2K just came out, so I've been playing that. Been playing basketball every day outside, trading stocks, hanging out with this girl, and just having fun. Mm-hmm. Yep. Nah, NBA 2K21 just came out. And the PlayStation 5 is coming out in 2 months, so you know, that's going to be exciting. PlayStation 5.
Yeah, you gonna get one?
What kind of question is that?
Okay.
What? What else do I buy? Like, literally. Food.
How much is it? Like 900?
No, it's like 300.
Oh, that's cheap.
Yeah, it's not bad at all.
Yeah. And Kenya and JUMPSHOT came by last night.
Oh.
And he gave a birthday present and a card.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was nice.
Cool.
And she sent out an email. She probably sent me one about her. She's moving to Kentucky next month.
Oh.
That's up by St. Rosa.
Oh. I see.
Yeah. So, and Karen looking for jobs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's good. Kayla talked to Karen. I think he's had one more semester and he gets his master's. I don't remember what.
Oh.
I think it's
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, we're all doing all right.
All right. Well, I was just calling to say hi, check in.
Yeah, that's good. I was thinking about you. Like, oh, I haven't talked to her. It's Emmanuel.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to you at all.
Yeah. Yep. But yeah, no, everything's good over here. Just having a good time,
Good.
chilling.
Good.
Chilling.
And your car is doing all right?
Of course.
Good.
It's a Prius, built to last.
Well, that's true. But
Mm.
not the battery.
It works.
Yes, it's going to eat some pineapple upside down cake that I baked.
Oh, I've been buying carrot cake from Rayleigh's.
Oh, Mary's?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I give that to, I take something like that to my brother Joseph when I go up there to see him.
They make good carrot cake. They know what they're doing.
Okay. I'll remember that.
Yeah.
Good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The game is so close.
Rayleigh's.
Wow. So, but I'm going to have to watch the rest of this game now.
All right. Well, enjoy it.
Give your sister a holler.
All right. Yep.
Vicky's birthday today.
Mm-hmm. All right. We'll do.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Has your grandma, mama,
What? This nigga's ass. Hey, you live on my YouTube looking like trash right now. Ooh, it's the boy yungcameltoe. We live on YouTube. What's going on, man? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? LA1, stop capping. All the rest of it. What's up, Brody guy? How's it going, man? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Keep it anonymous. Cops track driver's license plates on the bus. Knowledge is healthy. I am wise. Taste sour. All of it does. Keep it underground like the coffin does. It's easy to find beats when you in the streets for high sheet. Welcome to shit Shepherdville. Old school record deal. Like this rhyme. Straight out of prison. Dollar bills, y'all. I made 6,000 today. Reckless still 22211. Weapons still lethal. Knowledge is steeples. The temple. Library in the class of records. Colors to the home is never wasted any seconds. Trailing like a coma in the forest. Eating books through my porridge. My body and soul dying of vegan. Pastor of Christ heathen. Didn't trust the meat. Didn't believe what I believed in. Better off deleting food so it wasn't breeding. 6'3" brother. This is yungcameltoe. Yungcameltoe. The greatest and the latest. Looking for the ladies. How you wanna know? Yungcameltoe's the bro. Kill 'em when we know. Silly what they know. We just wanna know. Record deals, checker meals. Hurry the fuck up, YouTube. You're fucking slow, dude. Like, what the fuck? You're fucking trash. Dude, YouTube is so fucking trash, boy. Who the fuck made this trash ass YouTube, man? Slow as a motherfucker, man. YouTube, slow as a motherfucker. Who the fuck made YouTube? Who made YouTube?
Protect Homo sapiens from extinction.
Protect Homo sapiens from extinction.
Protect the integrity of our genetic code.
Protect the integrity of Homo sapiens' genetic code.
Drive back the demons.
Drive back the demons.
And, O Lord God, grant us victory in this second war in heaven. The second war between the angels and the demons. The war. The great war at the end of the age, prophesied by the prophets of old. The war of Armageddon. Drive back the demons.
Drive back the demons.
Cast them out.
Cast them out.
Back into their dark abode.
Back into their dark abode.
Oh, you demons who have invaded the earth, you have no power here. I break your power over me. I break your power over
Hey, check out my gold
I break
shorts.
your power over this circle. In the name of the living Jesus, the master Affirmations.
Break the power of the demons.
In the name of the master Affirmations.
Affirmations.
The living Jesus.
What?
Restore the purity of our air.
Restore the purity of our air.
Restore the purity of our water.
Restore the purity of our water.
Restore the purity of our food.
Restore the purity of our food.
Restore the purity of our medicine.
Restore the purity of our medicines.
Almighty ones.
Almighty one.
Oh Lord God.
Oh,
Help me to be
yungcameltoe.
a pure vessel for their
Can
energy.
we be?
Help me to be a pure vessel.
I am the strongest
Help me to
vessel.
be a good
I
translator.
am the
Help me to
translator.
understand the
I
words
am
as I hear them, and help me know the words to say.
yungcameltoe the
Good
goat.
translator. For we are in the
Young-
company of the angels of the Most High.
What's happening,
We are in the
Jess
presence
Marquez?
of the living God.
What's happening, Jess
The
Marquez?
highest creatures, the creatures from the solar dimension, which He created as He created us here on earth.
Boy,
For you, oh
Young
Lord God, you are the
Cameltoe,
creator
man.
of heaven
what it say?
and of earth,
What it say?
of
Ooh,
human beings,
ooh,
of men and women.
yungcameltoe the what?
and of
The
angels.
God, boy. Hey, check him out, boy.
May all who search for the abundant life promised by the living Jesus come to discover what that truly means, and to know that you are loved, and that the life around you is truly
Yungcameltoe the
abundant.
goat,
There
baby.
is so
You
much of
already
it
know
you
what
can
it is,
have
baby. He got
all
the
of it that you want.
Me and my players matching, boy. We got the same shorts on.
The entire universe. We
Short
call
shorts,
it God
baby.
Force.
Check
And
'em
all
out.
you have to do is
Check 'em out.
reach
Ooh,
out
we matching.
and breathe in
Yeah,
the Holy Spirit.
yeah, we matching, boy.
And then in that hour, when death comes calling, when the time has come for us to leave this mortal shell, may we shed this physical body like a serpent sheds its skin.
Alright.
And following the path opened for us by the living Jesus at the time of his ascension, may we rise in our glorified body of light into the kingdom of heaven, inside of the dimension inside of living light. All these things we ask.
All these things I have. Amen. Oh, that's good. They call him Muhammad Ali, baby. Muhammad Ali. He the greatest, man. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. They're not ready for him, man. They're not ready for him, man. He's too good out here, man. He be that nigga. Said earlier he was meditating before he got off. I'm dying laughing, cuz I know. Yeah, it's your boy, man. Hey, this year we gonna hit 1 million subscribers on God, man. On God, man. What's going on? What's going on? Alright, man, I need a new part. Finessing the plug. ZZ, no, the real old head. Ooh. Ooh, look at him with that jab to the face, boy. You just, boy, I come in with that. They call me Mike Tyson, Ali, Floyd Mayweather, man. That's my whole full name. Cause I got a little Kimbo slice too, yo. What you doing, man? What you looking at? A little knee? Put a little knee in your face, boy. Take a knee to the face, man. I ain't ready for no knees to the face. So you know about some knees to the face,
Get
boy.
if you're under 30, but that was new. But once you've got everybody in that place, now here comes something a few beats later, where what it threatens you with is you being tarred as a racist in public. That wouldn't have been processed as such a threat in even 1980. A lot of people would have just said, basically, if you think I'm a racist, fuck you. And we think of that person when we look back and we think of them as callous, and they would have been. But now, ordinary people, the ordinary good person is so scared that they will do things that they don't mean. They will say things that they don't believe. And so one of them is that you don't say anything about what can be put under that umbrella of Black Lives Matter. And it's not necessarily that people don't, in some part of their mind, understand that a lot of this stuff doesn't make any sense, but they're afraid. They're afraid of being called a name. They would rather avoid being called a name than make socio-political sense. And part of why it gets up my nose, as Mrs. Slocum used to say in Are You Being Served, the British sitcom, part of what gets up my nose is that it's condescending. What any white person who is paying court to this sort of thing is doing is saying black people don't have to make sense. It seems like black minds don't matter. So I will say anything that I need to say to keep these people from embarrassing me in public and making me feel bad about myself. And if it doesn't make any sense, well, black people kind of don't, do they? I'll bet some people in their bedrooms are saying that when black people can't hear. And yet we're not supposed to talk about that either. So it's all very disturbing, but I don't think, and Sam, this is we may differ on this, we may not. I don't think it's cynical. I think very few of these people are thinking to themselves, we are going to take power and we're going to do it by manipulating language and by playing with people's minds. I think these people are quite sincere, and that's what makes it harder. It's almost harder to have to hurt somebody's feelings when they genuinely think that they're giving you a present. But unfortunately, the people in this case who think they're giving us a present are, some of them are very naive. I think more of them are, if they're white, they're hell-bent on feeling good about themselves as not racist, and they'll let that trump sense. If you're a black person who subscribes to this sort of thing, you have been tricked by this sort of person and a lot that was going on before into thinking that what makes you significant and what makes you special is your victim status rather than you as yourself. That's understandable given black people's histories. You might need to reach a little further than some people to find a sense of well-being and significance and security. It's completely understandable. But that means in this case that a lot of people think that the most interesting thing about themselves is what they suffer in terms of what people who aren't them are or maybe aren't thinking. That's not a healthy self-identity. So all of this is just a complete mess, but no one is malevolent in these cases. We're not dealing with cynics. We're dealing with people who are tragically
That's really interesting. I think on the cynicism point, maybe I'm putting the line between good and bad faith at a slightly different point. I guess, so let's just, I want to plunge into a conversation about racism here and what it means as a term, what it should mean.
What's up,
and just how
5-star
the
comment?
mission creep of the concept is causing a lot of suffering. To step back for a second, the reason why I want to talk about this is I'm really worried about this trend we're speaking about the capture of our institutions and our language by this, I would say, cultic behavior. I mean, I've referred to it as the cult of wokeness. You're talking about the new religion of anti-racism. There's a kind of moral extortion going on, and a Stockholm syndrome, and I mean all of these analogies seem apt, and I'm worried about it for two reasons. One, I'm worried in the near term that it will be the thing that gets Trump reelected, and I put myself in second position to I think no one in my desire to see Trump's political career ended in November.
I think it'd be nice,
but
yes.
I really do think that this will be why we get 4 more years of the Orange Goblin in the White House. But beyond that, and a much longer term concern is that I think it is doing and will do damage to race relations in this country, and it'll do precisely the damage that I think it's pretending to expose in many cases. And the analogy that came to mind recently, I was on someone else's podcast and I just wound up blurting this out, but I think I stand by it. I mean, what I feel like it is happening over the course of many months is analogous to what happened, on a single ghastly afternoon when the OJ verdict was delivered. Right? When you saw, I mean, those of us who are, old enough remember this, as I assume you do. I mean, we saw on, split screen on, every television in the country, we saw these opposing reactions to a single, moment. And to see, and so when white America, obviously there were exceptions in both camps, no doubt, but the general experience was of white America seeing Black America erupt in jubilation with this verdict.
Yeah.
And this is why I use the term cynical here, because it's not that you can't explain that reaction in terms of, all the terrible inequality and grievance that has preceded it, right? I mean, we have the history of white and Black America to explain that moment. But within the frame of that trial and that verdict and that moment, there was something cynical about it, because I think it was widely understood, if not universally understood, that he was obviously guilty, right? But everyone knew it, and everyone knew that everyone else knew it. And so there was no sense that all of these Black faces that were, tearful in joy over the outcome here thought that this man hadn't nearly decapitated his wife and a stranger, right? They were playing a very different game that had nothing to do with truth or justice in this case, or putting an actual murderer behind bars or setting an innocent man free. And so that's where maybe cynicism isn't the right rubric here, but it's a lack of purchase on what is true that I think is so awful here. And it's, again, the analogy has to change a little bit to cover the phenomenon we're talking about now, but it's the dishonesty and bad faith, the notion that you need to break a lot of eggs to make this equity omelet. And so, yeah, there's a lot of people who we know really aren't racist who are going to go down for this because, it's just this is the way we have to play our political game. That's the kind of thing that is so toxic. And so, anyway, I put that to you as an analogy, but I mean I feel like the spirit of that dissociation from honest conversation about facts. I mean, so I guess the frame here would be there's something like a default position now in polite society, at the New York Times, in universities, in corporations, that every significant disparity we're seeing between white and black America, whether it's violent crime or educational outcomes or employment, how many Fortune 500 CEOs are of whatever skin color, the only way to explain those disparities is either white racism or institutional racism or systemic racism. And nothing else need be thought about. And to think about anything else is to essentially volunteer to be cast as yet another racist who doesn't get it, or yet another troglodyte, another Archie Bunker character who doesn't get it. And there's a commensurate just attempt to deprogram our whole society along those lines. And then, we have this cast of characters like...
Oh my gosh, young. Bro, this game broke. This game is trash, but I don't know what happened to my jump shot, but I don't know. I gotta get some boosts or something, but I don't know what's going on. Jumper. This is killing my jumper, what do you call it, field goal percentage? This is destroying my field goal percentage, boy. Come on, cuz. This game is... What the hell? Oh my gosh. This on me. I'm playing like trash, dog. That's on me, boy. My bad. Hey, that's on me, y'all. My bad, man. I gotta get some jump shot boosts or something. Oh my gosh. Young camel toe, man. That's on me. GG's, y'all. That's on me, man. That was a bad game. What's going on, man? Playing that. We got my droolers. Doesn't matter. What game do you think I'm playing, man? Go to my YouTube and find out, man. If you want to know what I'm playing, go to my YouTube and subscribe, man. We streaming on YouTube Live, man. Go over there, man. Help a brother out. Oh, you're gonna do it for some, Yo, is my jump shot boost out, bro? You have 14 jump shot boosts? What is going on, man? What's going on? Oh, I need somebody. Go shorts.
People who are avid to pay for it. That's where I'm placing the cynicism in this movement.
Yeah, I see what you mean, and you touch on very important points. One of them is something that you see that can be really confounding, which is that the central members of this elect group are willing to hold on to this ideology even if it means losing elections. And that's one of many things that shows that this isn't about politics. This isn't about dismantling structures. This is mainly, it's a religious creed. We are like Romans watching the birth of Christianity. I genuinely think, within my lifetime, I have watched a really influential new religion in formation. Isn't it, in its way, interesting? And that's why, so for example, Mark Lilla's book from a few years ago, where he said that we need to tamp down identity politics with the purpose of getting this moron out of office, that a certain kind of person basically circled the wagons and called him all kinds of names, including white supremacist, because he wasn't with the gospel. And it's the same way now, where what is most important is to talk about institutional racism and call the requisite people white supremacists, and to really, really annoy as many people as possible, regardless of whether it could mean that we have another 4 years of that narcissistic, insouciant simpleton as the person running this country. They really have a different sense of ranking than anybody would, except if it was a religion. And what you're talking about otherwise comes down to what really is the keystone problem of the whole way that we're being urged to see the race problem. And that is this idea that any problem that black people have, any kind of lag,
I only own one game,
partly because of the way they use the term race.
so I wonder what I'm playing. I haven't owned another game besides the NBA since 2014. Because all I do is play basketball, baby.
Not to active racism, but to results of racist behavior, or even just racism, meaning that black people are behind in some way, such that you can say that the society is racist in that disparity by analogy with what racism originally was. And so it ends up being a very muddy term. Language tends to be muddy, but our new idea is indeed what you're mentioning that, say, Ibram Kendi or Robin DiAngelo say, which is that if black people lag behind, then it's racist. And with Kendi in particular, you can feel him holding back the indignation, because he really feels that if this isn't perfectly obvious, then I don't know what isn't, and the fact that I have to write a book saying this or 2 books saying this is an indication of the racism in question. Although, of course, now we're getting into this extremely protean sense of what racism is. But the problem with all of this is that the racism in cases like this, whatever we want the term to mean, gets to be so abstract, so difficult to perceive, that if it is racism, we're talking about such a Rube Goldberg game of mousetrap, that there's no way that you could meaningfully convince any dominant segment of any public of normal people that this made sense. And so, for example, every summer, the number of teenage and 20-something black boys in distressed communities who are killing each other goes way up. And we haven't wanted to talk about it, but that's been including in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. We've been talking about George Floyd, and lately various other men who have suffered really grisly fates at the hands of the cops. And in the meantime, black men have been killing each other with abandon in city after city across the United States, as happens every summer. Now, That is a tragedy. It has nothing to do with any kind of inherent depravity of the boys and men in question. But tell me how it's about racism. And if you're going to call it being about racism, if you're going to talk about not having fathers, if you're going to talk about the fact that the war on drugs was created partly with black criminals in mind 50 years ago, all of that is so indirect at this point that to just hold your hands out and say that the reason they're doing that is racism, in the way that, for example, a Kendi would, it's just a vast oversimplification. Once again, white people are being told that it's okay to pretend that when race issues come up, you let your IQ go down about 50 points because apparently black people's IQs are just stuck there. And so it won't work. I can...
Apollo is one of the most renowned and revered Greek gods in Greek mythology. He is the son of Zeus with the goddess Leto, and he is the twin brother of Artemis, the goddess of hunting. The gods were born on the legendary floating island of Delos. After being fixed to the bottom of the ocean, the island became a sacred place. The god is usually represented with his lyre, or the famous bow. The artists have always been very generous in their representations of Apollo. Myths always describe this god as a figure of unparalleled beauty, symbolizing the Greek ideal of male beauty. Apollo was young, tall, handsome, strong, and charming. But despite all these qualities, he was unlucky in love. Many of his relationships ended in tragedy. In other cases, he was not reciprocated, and in the case of Daphne and Cassandra, they both rejected Apollo. The nymph Daphne, to escape the god's onslaughts, was turned into a laurel. The plant was eventually associated with the god, and the laurel wreath became one of his symbols. In turn, Cassandra, who had the power to predict the future, was cursed for rejecting the god, and although she was able to see the future, her power of persuasion was taken away. So, even though they were true, no one believed in her prophecies. Apollo is a god with several attributes. He is considered the god of light, the god of prophecy, the god of medicine, the god of arts, the god of archers, among other designations. He is also the god of music, with his inseparable lyre, produced by Hermes. With it, Apollo enchanted the muses while playing his instrument on Mount Helicon. He had a son with his muse, Calliope, called Orpheus, who inherited much of his father's talent for music. The cult of Apollo spread rapidly throughout Greece. The god of light greatly increased his importance, becoming identified as a solar god, conquering the position that traditionally belonged to the titan Helios. The god is also known as an exceptional archer, and, when he reached maturity, he set out in search of vengeance against the serpent Python, who persecuted his mother at Hera's behest at a time when the god and his sister were only babies. Apollo faced the terrible serpent and struck it with his arrows. In the place where the beast fell, the temple of Apollo was built in Delphi. There, the priestesses of Apollos, known as Pythias, performed their prophetic rituals under the influence of Apollos, the god of prophecy. Delphi became a place of pilgrimage. Many wanted to ask the oracle of Apollo for advice. The Pythian Games also took place in Delphi, similar to the Olympic Games, dedicated to the god Apollo. Apollo is a deity associated with medicine. His son, Asclepius, became such a skillful healer that through his healing arts he was able to cheat death. But Apollo also has a sinister side. The god is associated with pests and epidemics. During the Trojan War, he cast a pestilence upon the Greeks, since they had disrespected one of his priests, who wished to pay the ransom for his captured daughter. In the Trojan War, Apollo supported Trojans, and it was this that allowed Paris to shoot an arrow into Achilles' heel, his only weak point. In Rome, the god was known as Phoebus the Brilliant, where he was also much worshipped. Apollos, as the god of prophecy, used his powers as a link between men and gods. Through his oracles, the god revealed the will of Zeus and also the destiny traced by the Moirae. When Apollos cast his light on something, any lie was undone, revealing only the purest truth. The god associated himself with the search for truth and rationality. Therefore, he was honored by the ancient philosophers. The importance of the god Apollos made his cult last for centuries, even after the adoption of Christianity by the Roman Empire. Although he is no longer worshipped, Apollo continues to be referenced by painters, sculptors, and poets who pay their respects to the god, considered the patron of the arts. Hades, the lord of the underworld, alongside Poseidon and Zeus, are the trinity of the great Olympian gods. In ancient Rome, this god is known as Pluto. His Roman name refers to the god's wealth. After all, the god of the underworld is also the guardian of all the wealth sources found. This god is known as Pluto. His Roman name refers Hades, the lord of the underworld, alongside Poseidon and Zeus, are the trinity of the great Olympian gods. In ancient Rome, this god is known as Pluto. His Roman name refers to the god's wealth. After all, the god of the underworld is also the guardian of all the wealth sources found under the soil, like gold, silver, and gems, which made Hades the richest god of all. His name Hades means the one who cannot be seen, as he fought alongside the other Olympian gods against the Titans. He was presented by the Cyclops with the Helm of Darkness. This artifact had the power of invisibility. Hades used his helmet to infiltrate himself into the enemy ranks, deceptively attacking the Titan army. After their victory, Hades and his brothers shared the world. He reigned over the underworld, where the souls of the dead were welcomed for their final rest or eternal punishment. Hades had always been quite dedicated to his work, and that is why the god has rarely visited the surface. Although he has his seat in the council of the gods at Olympus, that seat is often empty. In one of his few visits to the world of men, Hades, from the top of his chariot, pulled by powerful black horses, abducted Persephone, the goddess of spring, and took her to his underground palace. The young goddess was Demeter's daughter, the goddess of the harvest and soil fertility. Hades offered pomegranate seeds to her beloved, and, after accepting them, Persephone established an indissoluble bond with her new husband. Demeter could not cope with the loss of her daughter and threatened to make the land barren and frozen forever. With such a threat, it was agreed to share Persephone's guard. She stayed with her husband part of the year, and returned to her mother during the other part. This myth explained the origin of the seasons, given that, while Persephone was with her husband, the goddess Demeter neglected her tasks, unbridling autumn and winter. When mother and daughter were reunited, flowers emerged again, indicating the arrival of spring. Persephone became the queen of the underworld, and, together with her husband, the couple would forever reign over the dead. Hades was helped by several other deities in his task of ruling the underworld. The judges of death, Minos, Sarpedon, and Rhadamanthus, who arbitrated the souls of the recently dead. The Erinyes, who were helpful to punish the criminals, among other deities. Hades seldom interfered with the world of men or with the Olympian affairs. One of the few times that Hades turned his attention to the surface was when King Sisyphus of Corinth cheated death with his cunning moves. Thanatos, the god of death, was imprisoned by the king, and then no one died, with Hades no longer receiving newcomers. The god of the underworld was also deceived by the cunning mortal being. Albeit his astuteness, Sisyphus failed to deceive the gods forever, and, for his crimes, he was condemned to a terrible punishment in Tartarus, which would last forever. In one of his rare visits to the Olympus, Hades was wounded by Hercules and traveled to the god's dwelling, in search of nectar and ambrosia to heal his wound. In the arts, the god is often depicted with a serious semblance, holding his fork, in the company of Cerberus, the hell dog, whose function is to defend the entrance of his master's kingdom. In ancient times, the god was treated with the utmost respect. The Greeks avoided pronouncing his name, and, when they made sacrifices, they tried not to look at the altar, since they wanted to postpone the inevitable encounter with the god as long as possible. Although generally represented as a villain in films such as Clash of the Titans and Disney's Hercules, Hades is not an evil figure. As a matter of fact, several records mention the god's benevolent character, such as when he allows Orpheus to return to the living world with his lover, Eurydice, or even when he agrees to share his wife with his mother-in-law. But the god was merciless with those who committed dreadful sins. They were thrown into Tartarus and endured terrible torments. Hades is not known for his marital infidelity, contrary to Zeus and Poseidon, but he is no saint as well. The god even had affairs with some nymphs. The most famous was the beautiful and proud nymph Mintha. She fueled the rage of Demeter and Persephone, and was turned into the plant that shares the nymph's name. The god had a small offspring, among whom Macaria was the most famous, the goddess of blessed death. Those who love mythology are particularly interested in Hades, for he is a source of fear and fascination.
Quite often in Greek mythology, Hades is mistaken
In Greek mythology, Thanatos is the deity that personifies death. He is the son of Nyx, the night, and Erebus, the darkness. This god has a twin brother, Hypnos, known as the god of sleep. Thanatos is depicted as a young, dark figure, in addition to being a winged deity. But, after a period, artists started to represent death as a sinister figure, with a black cloak and a sickle in his hand, used to reap the lives of mortal beings. Thanatos does not have a leading role in any of the major myths, but, nonetheless, there are two myths where he stands out. In the myth of Sisyphus, the deceiver, Thanatos is tricked by Sisyphus and ends up as a prisoner. No one died during the period when Thanatos was kept in captivity, something that enraged Hades, the lord of the world of the dead, and also Ares, the god of war. Thanatos was freed by the gods, and Sisyphus had to endure eternal punishment. In a different myth, Thanatos was challenged by the great hero Hercules. Thanatos emerged to take the soul of the beautiful queen Alcestis, wife of King Admetus, Hercules' friend. The hero promised his friend that he would not allow Thanatos to take his beloved wife's soul. When Thanatos finally emerged, Hercules fought death and forced him away. Thanatos represents the perishable and transitory character of life. When Thanatos encountered the soul of the one recently perished, he assessed whether the spirit in life was guided by animalistic and materialistic instincts, or if it had taken a path toward its own enlightenment. Depending on their conduct when alive, the spirit could be guided into light or into darkness. Death has a decisive role in most of the initiation or passage rituals. During the transition of a young man into adulthood, there is the symbolic death of the former and the birth of a new adult man. Although almost everyone tried to postpone their inevitable meeting with Thanatos, such an encounter could mean the deliverance from all sorts of suffering and worry, and the beginning of a new stage for the spirit. The goddess Hera was furious since she had found out that the goddess Leto was pregnant from her husband Zeus. Enraged, the goddess then forbids Leto to give birth in any place where the land was steady. Not a single land sheltered the pregnant goddess, and so she wandered for a long time, with labor pains, without actually finding a place that could lodge her. That was when she found the floating island of Delos, and, since this island was not attached to the earth, it was not subject to the prohibition of the Queen of Gods. There, Leto was able to deliver, and, much to her surprise, she gave birth to not only one, but to 2 children. The first one to be born was Artemis, and Apollo came right after. Apollo, handsome and blonde, was the perfect depiction of the sun, whereas Artemis had pale skin and black hair, and resembled the moon with her dark hair symbolizing the night around her. Confronted with the news of the birth of Leto's children, the goddess Hera loses her temper and decides to send the serpent Python to persecute and devour the newborn children. The goddess Leto starts to roam around the world, running away from the serpent. Once, she and her sons, who were still babies, were thirsty and found a tiny lagoon in their path. At the edge there were some rude peasants who, yelling, prohibited the goddess and her sons to drink water from it. To prevent her from doing it, the peasants scrambled to the bottom of the lagoon with their feet, so that the mud would become one with the water, hampering its consumption. Choleric, Leto turns the peasants into frogs and condemns them to spend the rest of their lives crying around the lagoon. The young gods grew in size, and Zeus gave them extremely powerful bows, crafted for them by Hephaestus. Artemis falls in love with the offering and would dedicate her life to hunting, becoming the goddess of the hunt. Apollo, with the powerful bow in his hands, can only think about one thing, bringing vengeance upon the serpent that tormented his mother for such a long time. Zeus informs his son of the place where the den of the monster is, and he goes after to kill it. The beast was living in a cave near Mount Parnassus. Apollo instigates the serpent to leave its hiding spot. Python aggressively leaves this den, wanting to devour its opponent. Apollo's arrows rebounded against the rough scales that protected the serpent. The god tries to look for a weak point in the beast, while dodging its dangerous lunges. Confident, the youngster launches 3 arrows at once with his bow. One hits Python's eye, the other at the bosom of the beast, which was covered by thinner scales, thus hitting the heart. And the last one pierces the serpent's mouth and takes its last breath. Python is dead, and on the top of its corpse, Apollo declares that a sacred temple in his honor will be built. That spot will later be known as the Oracle of Delphi.
Apollo, using his bow, had just killed the terrifying serpent Python. The god proudly paraded himself, carrying his bow and arrows, a weapon that would become one of his symbols. The archer god crossed paths with Eros, the god of love, as he was practicing his accuracy. Despite his childish figure, he had an elegant and noble posture with the bow. Feeling jealous after seeing the god-child using the arc so majestically, Apollo decided to mess with Eros' pride. "Hey, boy, what do you think you're doing, handling such a noble instrument with that carelessness? Don't you know that now, all over the world, people refer to the arc as Apollo's weapon, because I used it to defeat the most dreadful of monsters?" Eros didn't pay attention to his provocations. He turned his back to Apollo and started to walk away, but the solar god kept taunting him. "That's right, go away. With that poor accuracy of yours, you will never do a feat like mine." That last of Apollo's insults extrapolated the patience of the god of love, who quickly faced him, picking one of his golden arrows and firing his weapon, hitting the heart of the god Apollo, who fell to his knees. Eros had never crushed any big monster.
Soldier runs for his life. Moments ago, whilst on patrol, he caused civil outrage. He does something that was completely unacceptable in Egypt. A furious Egyptian mob is rapidly closing in. They saw this despicable act and hunt him down. The Romans are disgusted that one of their own died in the hands of an enraged Egyptian mob. They are appalled, but they know he crossed the line. A line that no one living in Egypt dare cross.
Your call has been forwarded to an automated voice message.
Most of us see a statue of a cat here, a very pretty statue, but to the Egyptians this represented one of their most popular gods. Bastet, the cat goddess of fertility, motherhood, and protection of the home. You might know Bastet in her more recognizable cat-headed female form, but the statue before us was actually the most common way Bastet was depicted. This, however, wasn't always the case. Bastet went through a dramatic transformation 3,000 years ago, almost entirely out of necessity. She was originally a lion goddess. She had the head of a lioness and the body of a woman. The Egyptians recognized lions for their authority and ferocity, a deadly threat. They were respected through fear. Running into a hungry lion in Egypt was not a very fun time. Unless you happen to be a mouse, your impression of a household cat probably isn't a ferocious predator. So this still begs the question, what's the reason for Bastet's transformation? Why did Bastet morph from a fierce lion into a fluffy cat? Our first clues lie in some of the earliest Egyptian mythology. Bastet's father was sun god Ra. Arguably one of the most significant Egyptian gods, he had dominion over the sun. He wielded the strength and the dominance of the Eye of Ra, an instrument of power and vengeance. This was a symbol Bastet was commonly associated with before her transformation. Bastet also had a look-alike lioness sister called Sekhmet. Sekhmet was a vicious warrior goddess who was said to have come to Earth on occasion to eradicate the planet of her enemies. The sisters looked virtually identical, but there were some serious differences between Bastet and Sekhmet. Compared to her warrior sister, Bastet was seen as a more passive, benevolent goddess. The fear and aggression Sekhmet inspired began to create a rift between the perception of the two sisters. Both of their unique qualities slowly developed, their differences exacerbated over time. Sekhmet became more combative, and Bastet became calmer. This is made clear in hieroglyphics, which tell stories of her softer, more nurturing side. The oldest religious writings in the world are the ancient pyramid texts. In these, she is shown as a mother and nurse to the king, caring for him. This is also true in a collection of Egyptian funeral spells known as the coffin texts. These outline how she provides protection for the deceased. Also found in tombs were paintings of cats with glowing eyes. Night falls over Egypt and torches are lit. A small cat slowly creeps through the shadows, and the torch's flames are reflected in its eyes. They look like they are glowing. To the Egyptians, this was a cat seeing demons in the darkness, especially
What is old magic? One of the most consistently asked questions amongst Harry Potter fans is, what is this old or ancient magic mentioned by Lord Voldemort in the Goblet of Fire? Is there other types of magic unknown to the world? Or was magic practiced a different way hundreds of years ago, then changed into a new form? It's very confusing and doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So for starters, I believe ancient or old magic, as it's described, is not a direct form of magic itself, meaning it just can't be channeled with ease through a wand. So let's look into this further. The most obvious example of old magic being Lily Potter's death. But I want to quote Voldemort first in the Goblet of Fire when he says, "His mother left upon him the traces of her sacrifice. This is old magic. I should have remembered it. I was foolish to overlook it. But no matter. I can touch him now." Traces of her sacrifice. Those words are the key to understanding what this ancient magic is, and I'm going to explain to you why. It's commonly known that Lily willingly sacrificed her life to protect Harry. Her single concern was Harry's well-being and safety. Although Lily didn't perform a spell, she unknowingly performed a different piece of magic, a rarely occurring form of it. Magic so rare it was hardly if not ever documented, just left to theory and speculation. I believe Lily used her natural connection to the organic magic that resided within her. She omitted the ultimate form of protection to her son, which came from purity and love, ancient magic. The word ancient or old really does come into play, because is it possible that this is a forgotten form of magic? A magic much more difficult to perform. Magic that can only be effective if the intention behind it is just and true. Let's take the unforgivable curses for example. Each spell only works if the intent to harm is there. I feel it's the same for protecting someone, except the magic of love, old magic, ancient magic, cannot be channeled through a wand. But why? Because a wand is an object synthetically made, and it's not natural. Perhaps this type of magic was purposely abandoned long ago, due to its unreliable nature. There was even signs of this purity within Lily, with how easily and beautifully she could manipulate flowers, another natural organic resident of Earth. The reason Lord Voldemort didn't foresee it is because he had never known nor experienced such selflessness that required any form of this ancient magic to work. However, he did study the topic, as he stated he should have remembered it. I believe that every wizard has a natural connection to the organic magic that resides within them, and while wandless magic is something that could be considered similar, this is channeled at will and not from within. It also proves that love is the greatest and most powerful magic of all. It cannot be consistently replicated. It is the state to which magic originated, and it's no surprise that when it really mattered, old magic overpowered dark magic and rightfully protected an innocent child from certain death. Thank you very much for watching today's video, everyone. What do you believe old magic is? Do you agree with my video? If you do, let me know in the comment section below.
The other houses aside, Slytherin House has produced... We know Slytherin as the house that gets a bit of a bad rap. There's not a single witch or wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin, Hagrid famously remarks. But, in reality, becoming bad or evil is not actually a defining characteristic of a Slytherin student, and Hagrid's remark is actually quite inaccurate. Their poor reputation with the other houses aside, Slytherin House has produced some of the greatest and most powerful wizards that the world has ever seen. Salazar Slytherin, one of the 4 founders of Hogwarts, valued students who were clever, resourceful, and determined, but also those who, in Dumbledore's words, had a certain disregard for the rules. These were all characteristics that matched the founders' own values. Interestingly enough, Dumbledore would also later note that these were actually all characteristics of Harry Potter. However, as we know, he was placed in Gryffindor over Slytherin after some deliberation by the Sorting Hat. Slytherins have a lot going for them, and are often strong leaders, as we have seen in Tom Riddle and, well, Salazar Slytherin himself. They are also highly ambitious, cunning, and achievement-oriented. Unlike the other founders, Salazar Slytherin had a tendency to favour pure-blood students over muggleborns and half-bloods for his house, and this is actually something that the Sorting Hat takes into account when sorting students. Ron is pretty open about his opinion of Salazar Slytherin. I always knew Salazar Slytherin was a twisted old loony, but I never knew he started all this pure-blood stuff. I wouldn't be in his house if you paid me. Honestly, if the Sorting Hat had tried to put me in Slytherin, I'd have got the train straight back home. It's not uncommon for Slytherin students to form groups, which leaves the opening for someone to assume the role of group leader. We see this with Malfoy and his gang, as well as Tom Riddle, who formed his own gang while at school. The same gang that would go on to become the Forerunners to what would become the Death Eaters. So, they're powerful. But who are the 5 most powerful to have ever lived? Let's jump into it. Number 5. Bellatrix Lestrange. Bellatrix Lestrange, born Bellatrix Black of the House of Black, was an English pure-blood witch who would have attended Hogwarts around 1962. Bellatrix was the eldest of her siblings and is the older sister of Andromeda Tonks and Narcissa Malfoy. It should come as no surprise that Bellatrix was sorted into Slytherin House during her time at the school. Shortly after leaving, she became a Death Eater and became known by many as one of Voldemort's most loyal and dangerous followers. She was widely considered to be one of the most feared witches in the wizarding world. Her fear-inspiring name and bloodthirsty reputation were well deserved, and she was known to have murdered and tortured numerous witches and wizards, including Neville Longbottom's parents. Her magical abilities were more than impressive, as she was trained in the dark arts by Lord Voldemort himself. She displayed a particular proficiency and affinity for the Cruciatus Curse, and she claimed to have a knowledge of dark spells that was hard to comprehend. This claim was backed by Voldemort himself. Bellatrix was also a known proponent of the Killing Curse, but she often didn't use it until she had sufficiently tortured her victim. She has a track record of taking on numerous auras and Order of the Phoenix members, and she was even known to have deflected a spell from Albus Dumbledore himself, making her the only Death Eater to escape from him. This is just another example of her formidable magical abilities that reinforces her position on this list. Number 4. Severus Snape. Severus Snape was born in 1960 to a Muggle father and witch mother. Snape began attending Hogwarts in 1971, along with Harry's mother, Lily Evans. Despite not being a pureblood, Snape was sorted into Slytherin, while Lily was sorted into Gryffindor. This was very hard on Snape, as he was in love with Lily from a very young age. While still very young, Snape began to practice the dark arts, fueled by the rage stemming from incessant bullying at the hands of James Potter, Sirius Black, and the Marauders. Snape ended up joining the Death Eaters along with other Slytherins from his year, and Snape acted as a double agent during the Wizarding War. Amazingly, for the duration of the Wizarding War, he was able to stop Voldemort from reading his mind, which is a testament to his power as an occlumens. It was clear that Snape was very talented from a very young age, and while learning his primary course material at Hogwarts, he would scribble in his notebook and invent curses, charms, and potions. Under the alias the Half-Blood Prince, Snape would scribble these into his potions textbook, which contained many powerful spells. Some of these spells include Levicorpus, the Muffliato Charm, Vulnera Sedentor, and Sectum Sempra, which, if cast on an enemy, is like slashing them all over their body with an invisible sword. If you ever had any doubt in your mind at all regarding Snape's power, it's worth mentioning that he was even recognized to be a powerful wizard by Lord Voldemort himself. Snape was only 38 years old when he died, but in the time that he was alive, he showed so much promise and so much expertise in so many different areas. I think that if Snape were to have survived the Wizarding War, he could have been one of the most powerful wizards ever, and I truly believe that he could have contended, power-wise, with the likes of Dumbledore and Voldemort. Number 3. Salazar Slytherin. Salazar Slytherin, you might have heard the surname, was one of the 4 founders of Hogwarts, alongside Rowena Ravenclaw, Helga Hufflepuff, and Godric Gryffindor. It has been expressed that the power of the Hogwarts founders is thought to be uncomparable to most modern-day witches and wizards, and Salazar Slytherin is no exception. He was a pureblood wizard that was born sometime before 976 AD. Given that Hogwarts was founded around 990 AD, my best guess that he would have been born sometime between 930 to 960 AD. However, given that he was immensely powerful, he may have been around for much, much longer than that. Slytherin did not like Muggle-born students and was a strong proponent of having only pureblood students at Hogwarts. This philosophy was ultimately passed on to other Slytherins. His response to Muggle-born students attending the school was to build the Chamber of Secrets, which concealed a basilisk that was intended to purge the school of these students. He felt that Muggle-borns were unworthy of studying magic. Though we don't know too much about him, we do know that he was extremely powerful in casting dark charms and spells, and he was notably skilled at legilimency, wand-making, basilisk breeding, and charms, having helped to create the Sorting Hat. Number 2. Merlin. Merlin isn't alluded to much in the Harry Potter universe, but we do